Well, hello, everybody, and thanks for listening. We are Ursula and Deb, and we are the co-creators of Universal Intentions, the book and the movement. Universal Intention is a powerful three-step process of reading, reflecting, and acting on the universal intention and to discover your own intentional self. Both of us have been working in the space of living, leading, and communicating with intentions for decades. I'm a certified neurotransformational coach and the co-founder of an international coach organization called Be Above Leadership. Deb is a communications and youth development professional who is passionate about guiding young people toward morally strong and deeply joyful lives. And today our topic is calling on courage. Thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here, Ursula.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you picked such an amazing intention that is on page 58 of our book. Why don't you go ahead and read it? And then we will look at the wisdom, the reflective questions, and the action steps as they are described in the book and have a conversation about them.
That sounds great. And this is ironically one that I actually wrote. So you and I wrote exactly the same number of intentions, and this is one that I wrote. So it's very dear to my heart. It speaks very truly to what we are experiencing now as a society. And I hope we can pause in a poetic way and just listen. So let love thread. When tragedy and death cry out to us nightly, in the news, in our homes, in our hearts, the cuts run deep. We bleed. Scowls thread, scorns weave through our flesh. The disdain is raw and real, wreaking havoc on humanity. May we cut through this sad pattern of tightly woven into the fabric of our culture. May we love each other fully, so cruelty occurs no more. Save us from ourselves, almighty leaders of lands. Remove the torment and ignorance from our world. Stitch us together with your love. Rip apart the culture of hate. Bring healing to the hurt. Break the pattern of harm. Surround us, Mother Quilt. Wrap us tight in your endless warmth. When I was thinking about this and the synergy of, or the, I guess, the metaphor of a quilt, that's what really kept me writing these words of, you know, the weaving of the threads and the warmth that comes from being protected by our Mother Earth and each other, really. And so that was the essence or the crux of this particular intention.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when I think about a quilt, you know, wrapping myself in the warmth of a quilt, and it's also my experience that a quilt is usually a gift given by somebody. I'm not a quilter, so I mean, if I own a quilt, it has to be given to me or I won't have one. And you know, I know the people that quilt, the detail, the attention of the patchwork. And this is really what I love about this intention, is looking at the patchwork of all our humanity. And then when we stitch it together with love, that it is a beautiful quilt of differences that are acknowledged and honored, but woven together, that then, you know, gives warmth and truth and love to the world. It's a wonderful metaphor.
Exactly. And I guess I'll just add a little bit more about the metaphor. I do have a couple people in my life who are very, very much quilters. And they will say that the surprise of a little scrap of nothing that was laying in the corner of their sewing room can sometimes be just that little perfect, beautiful spark of awesomeness that makes that quilt exactly what it needed to be. So I think that the elegance of its completed product is just as rich and important as that little tiny piece of material or the color of the thread that's chosen to bring it all together.
Yeah. Well, as a neurotransformational coach, being trained in transformation in neuroscience, I can't help but think about this other metaphor that as it relates to neuroscience. So the fabulous Dr. Dan Siegel, founder of the Mindsight Institute and author of a gazillion books on the mind, the brain, and brain integration, he actually calls integration, and he relates it to the brain. But for me, this statement is also a great metaphor for everything. And so this reminds me, as you're talking about a quilt, he says integration is the linkage of differentiated parts. So basically he's saying, if we cannot look at the individual parts of the quilt and honor and delight in the different patterns and colors and themes, if we don't know what these individual patterns look like and what they mean, we cannot stitch them together so that they become a linked and integrated patchwork of a quilt. And so I think that's another great metaphor that ties into the quilt. As we look at the world as it is today, June 18th, 2020, in the middle of COVID, in the middle of great upheaval as it relates to racism in the United States and in the world, these two metaphors have really great significance, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the piece for us to reflect, deeply on is what part of the quilt that we are making in our own lives are we bringing forward? Are we being, are we wrapping people around us in love and warmth? Or are we, how are we living that out in our own lives?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm wondering, should we read the universal wisdom in the book and then go to the reflective questions that I think are really powerful?
That'd be great.
Okay, so universal wisdom is on page 59, the next page. Universal wisdom, it is agonizing to witness and experience the traumatic devastation and loss of life in our society. If we allow them to, the incidents can keep us in a state of deep sadness. We must intentionally choose to believe and have hope for the improvement of the human condition. We must believe that collectively we will emerge to find a state of love. So the questions here are, what current event has touched you recently and shaped the way you see the world? That's the first question.
Right. And I think that as a person living into the journey of, read and reflect and act is the way I live my life. That is what our book is about. I've been reading so much and reflecting on, anti-bias work and racism in our country more than I ever had before. I had definitely, made myself aware. I'm a pretty aware person of my own personal biases, but boy, did I jump in head first, from Brené Brown podcasts to, lots of incredible movies and series on Netflix and Amazon Prime, really trying to expose myself to every possible angle so that I can reflect on my own privilege and my own upbringing in a very white area of our country, right? So I think that's been my personal reflection on that, and really wanting to challenge myself, but also challenge others around me. And others around me are not on the same journey. So my husband, my daughter, my son are not on the same journey. They're certainly kind people, but they aren't in this, like, I need to learn more and I need to become a better person. I need to be an anti-racist, right? They're not on that same journey of passion as I am.
Yeah.
So,
well, and it comes also, in the environment in which you work with a very, very racially diverse population. You work within a, very incredible nonprofit. And I think that, that has to some degree shaped you, because you're being exposed to the lives of people that come from different countries and, often struggle being integrated, and adjusted to the American way of life.
right.
So,
and you had mentioned about being from Germany originally, and your experience as a German in this topic is very different than your experience as an American in this topic.
yeah, and it's it's been, the last 4 weeks have really been painful, because I find myself at a loss of how to respond, even if to respond. Then I read an article that said, if you're silent, that speaks loudly for itself. And I felt very shamed and discouraged. And then, it really brought me to this place of saying, well, I am not an American. I mean, we've lived here for 20 years, which you think is a long time, but I have lived 45 years somewhere else. And that has shaped me with very different perspectives and living in very different cultures. And so I have really struggled getting sort of aligned with some kind of a response, that, because for me, it has always been more about global. It's like, I'm a global citizen. I've moved so often that it's very hard for me to identify with any country.
Right.
But I also realize that that's not the right response.
Right.
And that white privilege is really something that I've never looked at, because I never had to. And that, I think, has been a gift, is to say, yes,
right,
that is true for me, and I need to acknowledge that. We all come with trauma, but my trauma is different from the suppressed and racism that other people experience on a daily basis, and the kind of fear that they experience. I never had to, and that is a privilege.
Yep.
So it's been both painful, but also somewhat illuminating.
Mm-hmm.
So then the next question is, where do you show ignorance and judgment of other people? And I want to just build on what I've just said. Yeah, I thought I had this global opinion on how I saw race, very much from, our consciousness model, the 7 levels, and from a brain perspective. And then I realized that I don't know anything. I'm completely ignorant. I am totally and utterly ignorant.
Right. And I think the things that surfaced for me were, one, it is my responsibility to encourage, starting where I'm at, to build on what I know, to acknowledge what I don't know, and to fully embrace that I just want to get better. And it is my responsibility, and only my responsibility, to move myself to that next level of awareness and that next level of connection with people. I have a unique tie in that my father is a police officer, and has been in a very small town in Minnesota that is, again, was in the day I was growing up, very, very white dominant. And so I have this just other perspective that many people don't have. And I love my father dearly, but it wasn't until I moved to a much larger city when I was 22, or lived abroad in Spain and lived abroad in Mexico, that I really, really started to kind of unpack how important it is to meet people where they're at, and to stay in curiosity as you're learning through their own life journey.
Yeah, and I think that's fabulous, and it's a very, very powerful full statement. I think so building on that, what it has made me realize, and so you mentioned this already, is that, I have certain gifts that I can bring to the world as it relates to healing whatever is going on. And those are the gifts I need to rely on now. My gifts of coaching, my gifts of being a neurotransformational coach, by helping understand what happens when we're in fear and in frustration, and helping people to move to a level of courage. Those are the things that I can do to bridge the divide or bring some healing to whoever shows up in my life. I am not a gifted protester. That is not my thing. And, I think we all have gifts. And if we can use these for healing and peace and a mutual understanding and mutual curiosity, then we are moving in the right direction. I really, one of the things that I want our listeners to really see is, look at your gifts and do what you can with those gifts that bring unity or love or understanding or even curiosity, just curiosity to the world.
I think that's right. And I think we don't often take account of what our gifts are. So that can be kind of one step in this journey. As you're listening to this, pull out a piece of paper and write down, what are those 3 things that you think are your strengths or are your gifts, and stay in those and expand those. And so one of mine is writing. As Ursula said, one of hers is coaching. I need to stay in writing a lot. And I've actually been, probably over the last 2 months, it's been hard pressed to sit down and pull out a notebook or pull out my computer and do that thing that I know is a gift and I love. And so I really have to give myself that time and space. And we encourage you to do that for you, our listeners. Find that gift and practice it regularly.
I really love that. Well, the taking action is part of the Universal Intentions book. It's like, read the intentions, listen to the universal wisdom, then the reflection questions, 2 of which we have asked, and the third one we have sort of answered. The third question was, how can you be the peace you want to see? And, that is really building, looking at your gifts and then looking and taking action. And one of the action steps or questions here is, how can you bring healing to a world that is desperate in need of positive energy and love? And you just said that, is take stock of your gifts and don't believe that you have to be like anyone else. Use what you have for bringing more healing into the world. And I think, so where I sometimes go is like, it needs to be big and global and world changing. I would love to work with the United Nations. And it's like, hold on a minute, just love your family right now. They have moved into our townhouse for 10 days, 2 adults, 2 little kids, and a huge dog on top of me and my own dog. And this is a townhouse designed for 2 people, not for, 5.5. It's just like that situation of change and challenge. Do that with love. Start there. It doesn't have to be the United Nations. Do it with your neighbor, whoever, right? Close into your heart, people that are closest to you. Start there. That'll create a ripple effect.
I was thinking the exact same thing, because I'm working on a 2nd book right now, and I just keep thinking, I can't put anything out into the universe in my writing until it's signed, sealed, and delivered and perfect. And then I think, what the heck? Since when do you want to monitor yourself so closely? It's putting up things out into the universe that gets incredible feedback, and people give you, that sort of feedback you need. I think the other thing that I think of when you say your family is one thing. I'm going to go back to the courage point. We as parents are a little bit afraid to ask our children, how are they doing through this this epidemic and or all of the things they are experiencing. We are experiencing some really hard stuff in our hearts, and we're adults. We can get through the tough stuff. We have strategies that we've figured out over the years, but our kids, no matter how old they are, they're feeling this energy too, whether they recognize it or can name it or understand it. They're really feeling it too. And so one thing I really like to, remind people is to stay in courage. Just sit there on the side of your child's bed. They may say absolutely nothing to you, but ask questions that are open-ended and give them the sense that they are seen and they are loved. And even those words, I see you, I hear you, I love you, even if all you got back as an answer was a grunt and you didn't get, a really well thought out answer, that's okay. But if you share those words, I see you, I hear you, and I love you, and you can come to me anytime something's bothering you, that is sometimes more powerful, and the child will start that conversation with you when they're ready, because in that moment that you sat on the edge of their bed or tucked them in at night, they may not be ready. But opening the door to courageous conversations is so critical.
Well, and just as you were saying it, we have a thunderstorm outside the window. Just as you were saying it, there was this almighty boom. I don't know if you saw me flinch, but it's kind of an underline almost, from the heavens going boom, yes. And you really have sort of coined this phrase of, the pause, the 5-second pause. I think one of the things that I hope our videos will do is help people actually pause and slow down and not rush headlong into something that is not intentional. So I hope that, whatever we record will encourage people to do that and look at the book and use those reflections and the wisdom within the book for their own growth and inspiration when you need to be inspired.
Absolutely. I had a neighbor, I went on a walk with her, of course, 6 feet apart, but we went on a walk the other day, and she just out of the blue just goes, I was just reflecting on your book. It's sitting on my nightstand. And I was like, that is the sweetest thing ever. And she just reminded me back to your kind of energy around, well, what did you do that's big and life shattering and earth, earth shifting? Yeah. And she goes, that's really a big deal to write and publish a book. I said, I guess.
I guess so. I mean, I have the same reaction.
But I just, okay, yeah, oh, yeah. And I think that I just want people to really think about the things that are so small, like you put dinner on the table, twice a week for your family, and you sit down and have a family meal. That's a really big deal in today's society. Don't underestimate the little things that open up the door for really great conversations with the people you love. Maybe you go visit your mother and father-in-law or your mother and dad every Sunday for, lunch, or every first Sunday of the month. Fine. That's a big deal. You're making a connection. You're stepping into, building relationships. Yeah. Don't underestimate how big small things are.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, I'm really bad at that. I'm really bad at that. I mean, it's like, if I look at the last 10 days or last 3 weeks of my life, I mean, I haven't had a day off in 3 weeks. I've been, moving, helping move, clean, paint, laundry, dinner, clean, paint, more, work, coach, do videos. And it's like, you should have done more.
I just have to say, nope, that's enough.
No, that was enough. That was enough loving for 3 weeks. So, all right.
Yeah, I'll just, wrap this up here, Ursula, by saying, as we conclude, we really leave people with, we hope you buy the book. It's at universalintentions.org or amazon.com and other major booksellers. And we really hope everyone stays on this journey with us as we together live, lead, and love with intention.
Thank you. And if you like the video, pass it on and like us. And we hope to see you soon. Bye-bye. Thanks, Deb.
Thanks, Ursula.